Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shannon Bridges from AEE, and we're excited to have our speakers for today. I want to tell you a little bit of how this call will go. We're going to let Catherine kick us off with some background information and a presentation, and then we have two speakers after her that will also follow up to the general topic of future and greenhouse hydrogen. Want to let you know there probably will be questions along the way, and that's fine. However, we're not going to start the presentation at that point to answer the questions. I'd like to encourage you to please add those to the chat. And then when we wrap up the presentations, we will start to go into chat and ask our presenters these questions so that you can get your answers. You will also get an email tomorrow with a link to this presentation, and that email should also serve as your credits. So please hold on to the email. And if you do want a copy of this presentation in a PDF, please reach out to Shannon at aeecenter.org. And that can also be found on our website, aeecenter.org. So I'm going to turn this over to Catherine. And Catherine, I'm excited for you to get us started on this exciting topic.
Yeah, in 2019, AEE was fortunate enough to give me a webinar series that focused on energy policy innovation and its impact on carbon reduction. And today's topic is actually going to focus on the future of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is hydrogen produced by renewable energy, including wind, solar, tidal energy, and hydro. When used in fuel cells, green hydrogen can produce power while only emitting water. It can be used in a number of ways, including long duration storage, which will be important, transportation, and reducing the carbon footprint of heavy industry by using green hydrogen instead of fossil fuels. Green hydrogen, as we've seen, is hydrogen produced using renewable energy, but hydrogen comes in three colors: gray, blue, and green. Gray hydrogen is produced using fossil fuels, including natural gas. Blue hydrogen also uses fossil fuels, but includes some kind of carbon capture. Some people also consider hydrogen produced using electricity from nuclear power to be blue. Today, it's important to note that by far, most hydrogen being produced is either gray or blue, but you'll hear about efforts to change that during this webinar. Green hydrogen is one of those technologies that always feels 10 years away. And quite frankly, I had a little bit of a dialogue with one of the, key guys over at AEE, last week. And he said to me that green hydrogen, I wasn't going to really see it implemented significantly in the United States in our lifetime. And I sincerely disagree with him. I think it's the real deal. We're beginning to see serious investment and new technological development that we believe will make green hydrogen successful beginning now. And there are very many exciting examples of green hydrogen used around the globe, but I want to highlight two today. First is in the Orkney Islands in northern Scotland, where tidal and wind energy has been successfully captured and used to make hydrogen, which is then stored, used to supply power on the island, and used in vehicles. Soon they will begin using that hydrogen to power ferries and heat schools. Another exciting example comes from Australia, and that's where the government is working to build the Asian Renewable Energy Hub. The goal is to use abundant wind and solar assets in Western Australia to export green hydrogen to parts of Asia that are looking for a clean fuel source. That project could see the installation of 26 gigawatts of wind and solar projects and the creation of at least 3,000 jobs. As you'll hear today, investment in that technology is also happening in the United States, and we certainly believe more is coming. Quick history lesson is important. In 2016, the world entered into the Paris Agreement, which set a long-term goal of keeping global warming under 2 degrees Celsius. In order to limit that temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the world needs, in part, to decrease fossil fuel production by at least 6% early next year through to 2030. And in 2019, New York passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which solidified clean energy goals for the state, including a mandate to have zero emissions from the energy system by 2040. New York is currently one of 25 states that have committed to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. Also in 2019, the European Union announced a commitment to eliminating net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That was joined by China in 2020, and they committed to reaching carbon neutrality by 2060. On November 4th, 2020, the United States officially left the Paris Agreement, a long-term promise from the Trump administration. But the incoming Biden administration has pledged to rejoin the Paris Agreement, meaning we can expect more federal government support for clean energy, including green hydrogen. So why green hydrogen now? In addition to the political momentum behind green hydrogen, there's a financial incentive. According to an article in Forbes, there are more than 90 billion of hydrogen projects under development today. Not all of them are green, and significant demand is already materializing. Green hydrogen has the potential to solve many problems as we work towards the 100% emission-free power system. To begin with, there's an increasing amount of intermittent renewable energy assets that are added onto the grid. And, think about it. The wind doesn't always blow. The sun doesn't always shine. Sometimes power is too little. Sometimes it's too much. And the demand for power is now being decoupled with the generation of power. Today, for example, as demand increases on the grid, an operating system is able to call on dispatchable resources, including natural gas power plants. And those type of plants, it's very easy to ramp up power deployed on the grid. They can go up, they can go down. But you can't ask a wind farm to produce more wind. And then what happened is that the New York Independent System Operator recently put a study out there called the Climate Change Impact and Resilience Study, which is actually pretty cool. They did some very challenging work. They looked at several scenarios, envisioning a 100% clean energy grid. All the scenarios included a significant increase in installed renewable energy capacity. And to do that, the only way to ensure that the grid was going to work right, it was going to be reliable, is that you really needed a lot of dispatchable energy storage. In this chart from the New York ISO, you see that the demand, which is the black line, bears very little relationship to energy generation. And to fill in the gap, the New York ISO is relying on dispatchable and emissions-free resources in gray. In their report, the New York ISO did not identify any particular technology that would qualify as dispatchable resource, instead noting that whatever technology comes online needs to be flexible and able to be stored for long periods of time. Green hydrogen, especially when it's produced using renewable energy that would otherwise have been curtailed, is both capable of long-term storage and rapid ramping, meaning it has the potential to match exactly, the dispatchable resources that the grid will need. Up until recently, natural gas was viewed as a climate change solution. I think some of my colleagues in the utilities in New York State are on the line, and what we saw, and I'm really talking like the last 5 years, even 3 years ago, there was a lot of natural gas to oil to natural gas conversions. As a result, there was a significant increase in natural gas on their systems. And as we increase our reliance on natural gas, which is much cleaner than fuel oil and coal, our greenhouse gas emissions declined. And as you can see from the chart from the New York ISO, in New York, our emissions fell dramatically since 2000, largely due to the shift towards natural gas. Today, we're moving past natural gas and we're making that transition rapidly. As we mentioned before, nations and states around the world have clean energy goals that demand a zero emissions energy system within the next 30 years. Recently, we saw ExxonMobil announce a plan to write down 20 billion of investments in natural gas. And in New York, natural gas companies are being pressured by state regulators to create plans to adapt to clean energy goals. There is a real concern that natural gas infrastructure that we've installed is at risk of becoming a stranded asset. And it's been a significant investment that's been made. It can be a drag on our economy once we no longer use or need natural gas. However, many gas companies are looking into using natural gas infrastructure as a way to store and transport green hydrogen. Some companies are also considering blending green hydrogen into the natural gas system as a way to avoid supply constraints and clean up the system. And we're going to hear more during that discussion. Today's panelist is Sanjay Shrestha, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Plug Power, which is a leading manufacturer of hydrogen fuel cells. He will be the first speaker. Trish Walker is Director in Business Development for the East region at Liberty Utilities. She's focused on the sustainable development of projects and new technologies, which will help the decarbonization of natural gas and electric assets. And Sanjay, take on the next discussion.
Great. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this panel here. Really appreciate it. One point I might make here to start out, I know the topic of our panel here today is future of green hydrogen, but we at Plug Power believe it's actually the time of green hydrogen is today. The future is only going to get better, brighter, and growing a lot more than where we are today. But we do believe that the time for the green hydrogen has come here today. And we are actually working on a lot of projects, a lot of big green hydrogen generation facilities that will allow us to supply that green hydrogen to some of our major customers at cost and price parity, essentially in line with what they're paying for the gray hydrogen today. You know, I'll certainly talk a lot more about our ongoing work on the green hydrogen side and what we're looking to do to build the first green hydrogen network here in North America, how we plan to take that to Europe and hopefully take that effort on a global basis. But before I do that, maybe a couple of quick remarks on Plug Power and some of our existing business here and how we have really established ourselves as a company with, and Sean, if you can maybe quickly go to the next slide here, if you don't mind. Yeah, so again, just very quickly, a couple of stats here for everybody. We have the most number of the fuel cell system out in the field. We're very proud of the fact that we've really created the first viable, economically driven commercial market for hydrogen fuel cell. We are the largest user of liquid hydrogen on a global basis. We surpassed NASA about a year ago. And we're in a process of building the first gigafactory for the fuel cell industry, which will be able to produce over 500 megawatt of electrolyzer on an annual basis. And we are, you know, with some of the recent acquisition of electrolyzer technology, as well as green hydrogen liquefaction capability, we believe we'll really put the skill set together to become the leader in the green hydrogen generation business as well. Next slide, please. Again, this is opportunity is very substantial. All of you have seen a lot of these numbers, right? Our core market is material handling, depending on, I think, you know, whether it's some of the investment firms' estimates or the Global Hydrogen Council estimates, you know, we are looking at $1 trillion+ opportunity when we think about the hydrogen economy on a global basis. And we at Plug Power couldn't be more proud to be a part of this industry and also help facilitate the growth of this industry. Next slide, Sean. Again, this is our core market, and folks have been buying our hydrogen fuel cell system to run the forklift because they're saving money. They're getting a lot of productivity gains. They're actually getting fast charging. For anything that's heavy asset utilization application, we tend to do quite well with the hydrogen fuel cell solution. And that's why when we talk about hydrogen, green hydrogen and fuel cell, our view is the market is here today, and it is only going to continue to grow as we look out over the next several years or over the next several decades. Next slide again, sure. Again, this is just, we've actually almost 30% of the food and the groceries in the US is moved with our hydrogen fuel cell. And, again, given the difficult environment that we're all faced with, we couldn't be more proud that we've been able to keep our systems running at 99% utilization and really have further validated the value proposition of uptime, really that productivity gain that you get from the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, in this particular case, serving the material handling industry. Next slide, Sean. Again, this is where we believe we've addressed one of a very, very critical element in terms of this whole hydrogen ecosystem. And also even from an on-road hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle perspective, because serving customers like Walmart and Amazon, we have actually built over 100 of these, fueling infrastructure to support forklifts that are running in the distribution center, which could also serve as a fueling solution for the on-road Class 6 and Class 8 vehicle as well, with some minor modification to the existing infrastructure, to a point where today one of our customers could essentially go drive cross-country, essentially stopping at the distribution center where we have built this fueling infrastructure, and which we continue to maintain for them. And really, we believe that we've tackled this whole issue of the infrastructure challenge, thereby helping for the proliferation and adoption of the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. Next slide, Sean. Again, these are all the portfolio of product in the on-road market. Our product is very modular in nature. We can serve, material handling industry, forklifts, all the way to Class 8 truck, as well as a large-scale data center market as well. And next slide. Again, this is the, very similar value proposition in the on-road market, like in the material handling industry. It's all about fast charging, range, and payload, which is where we believe it really comes down to hydrogen. It really comes down to fuel cell electric vehicle rather than just a battery electric vehicle as the optimal solution when you start to think about the on-road application from the electrification perspective. And if one is using green hydrogen to power hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, from the wells to wheels perspective, it's as close to zero greenhouse gas emission as one can get. Next slide, please. Again, this is a tremendous opportunity that is ahead of us. Again, this is essentially replacing the diesel generator to run on our hydrogen fuel cell to provide a backup solution for the large-scale data center market. We have a lot of activity in this market as well. And, we expect to work with a lot of big customers and companies in terms of providing the, green hydrogen backup solution and displace the diesel generator and provide them with the requirement of the continuous power supply while really addressing a lot of the climate challenges that they are faced with as well. Next slide, please. Again, as most of you guys know, Europe is a big opportunity. We have a lot of effort in that market as well. And similar to some of the climate effort in New York, activities in California, there's a lot of effort going on in Europe as well. And with our presence in that market, we certainly expect to get our fair share of the business in Europe as well. Next slide, Sean. This is again the gigafactory that we're building, which will allow us to have this electrolyzer capacity, fuel cell capacity, and will be the first of a kind, fully automated gigafactory. And we are looking to announce the actual location of this gigafactory, hopefully in a very near future here. Now on to the green hydrogen, right? So as I briefly touched on it earlier, so we have brought in-house capabilities of electrolyzer, which is what allows, as Catherine was talking about, renewable electricity going through an electrolyzer produces gaseous hydrogen. We actually now have a company that we acquired in June of this year, the only private company in the world that have successfully built a liquefier, in the last several decades outside of the industrial gas companies. We actually do have a lot of logistics capabilities, and I just talked about it earlier. We actually have built a lot of the customer-facing infrastructure, thereby really positioning ourselves to play a major role in proliferation and the growth of this green hydrogen economy as it continues to unfold. And one final point here, as we are looking to build this green hydrogen network in the US, We already are one of the largest user, so that also allows us to kind of de-risk some of this investment because we know how big of a demand we already have this year going into next year, as well as the kind of the demand coming from our core market by 2024. Next slide, Sean. So this is, most of you guys on the call here know this probably better than I do. It's a simple electrolyzer, which will be a 1 to 5 megawatt scale. The picture on the right-hand side here is our liquid plant. This plant is actually based in Tennessee. Sorry about that, guys. This is the plant that's based in Tennessee, and this is today we have our plant 6.4 tons a day, which we're expanding to be 10 tons a day. But that's a blue hydrogen. That's not a green hydrogen. But we're looking to transition from low carbon to zero carbon hydrogen solution as we move forward. Next slide, Sean. So these are some of the ongoing activity that we have right now. The first green hydrogen plant is going to be in Pennsylvania. We are working with the folks at Brookfield on that, which is going to be their hydro plant. And essentially, this is 100% green hydroelectricity. And this is going to be our first 10 ton per day, 100% green hydrogen plant. And we expect this plant to be up and running, producing hydrogen fuel and molecule by the end of 2022. We're also in a process of finalizing the location, final power purchase agreement. This will be, powered by wind assets. This is essentially a large wind farm in Texas, which is the source of electricity for us to produce 30 tons per day of green hydrogen. But what's really exciting here, apart from just also being the green hydrogen, is we've been able to source right cost of 24/7 renewable electricity, which really allows us to actually produce this green hydrogen at cost parity, and thereby allows us to sell it at a similar price to gray hydrogen today, while still maintaining the margin and getting the return on these assets as we are making these investments. Next slide, Sean. And this is the network I was briefly touching on, right? We're looking at building 5 green hydrogen liquid plant, and build a network that is resilient enough that can serve our customers for the material handling market. And as they also expand in the on-road application, that's another opportunity that we can serve as well. Again, we obviously would like to get this done even before 2024. That is what we're going to try to do. We'll have a plant in, we're looking to build a plant in Texas, as I said, in Pennsylvania. We'll have a plant probably also in the state of New York, in California, potentially in Georgia or Illinois. So the funnel is much larger than the 5 plants, but we do expect to have the first real network of green hydrogen generation facility here in North America to serve a variety of the different industries. Next slide, please. And this is again, outside of just the material handling, our core market, we do expect to see tremendous demand materializing for the liquid hydrogen from the broader transportation market. Just to put things in context for everybody, right? A forklift will consume 1 kilogram of hydrogen a day, but your Class 8 truck will consume as much as 50 kilograms to 60 kilograms of hydrogen a day. So that has a significant multiplier effect. And that's another reason, right, why we're getting into this green hydrogen generation business, because we want to make sure that hydrogen becomes more and more ubiquitous. We do not want to have hydrogen or more specifically, lack of hydrogen supply, essentially impacting what could be such a big growth rate from the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle perspective. Next slide, please. And I think Catherine already talked about it, right? So, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about this from Trish as well. So as the levelized cost of renewable electricity continues to go down, given that that is the biggest cost component for the green hydrogen, we should expect to see continued decline in the cost of green hydrogen as well. But today, we're thinking about green hydrogen as a liquid green hydrogen, which means, we are actually looking at 24/7 power. So either we oversize the wind farm, or we use renewable hydro, or the oversized solar asset. There'll be some level of grid connection, but there is a scenario we can all envision here where it's just a low-cost renewable. Either it's curtailed renewable or it's stranded renewable. It is a renewable that is focused on decarbonizing the electric grid, but you have grid stability issues. That's where we can really use that increasing mix of renewable in the grid to produce low-cost green hydrogen, not just to serve the mobility market, but the variety of different industrial application, and also really help the industrial sector get decarbonized and displace it from gray hydrogen to blue hydrogen, then eventually to green hydrogen, whether it's be the fertilizer industry, whether it be the refining industry. That is another big market that will really open up for green hydrogen as the levelized cost of renewable electricity continues to go down, thereby end up becoming really an issue of, this way we get to decarbonize the grid, continue to add more renewables, leverage that low cost electron and turn it into a high value fuel, which is really a matter of also a national and an energy security. So we couldn't be more proud that we get to play a role in this market to really help the energy mix that is going to be less and less carbon intensive as we go forward. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of where we want to go as a company, not just about the green hydrogen as a public company. We have laid out that we're going to be about a $1.2 billion in revenue, $250 million in EBITDA. But the way we think about it, we will be a diversified technology company that has a excellent global hydrogen energy platform, generating a lot of cash and continuing to help propel and grow with the anticipated growth of the green hydrogen generation industry. With that, I really thank you all for your time and look forward to your question. Back to you, Catherine.
Next, I want to introduce Trish at Liberty Power.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trish Walker from Liberty Utilities. I'm a Director of Business Development in our East region, and I'm so pleased to be here today to speak to you about the hydrogen for the future. Next slide, please. So some of the things I'm going to be speaking today are about who Algonquin Power, our parent, is, case studies and pilots in hydrogen in Europe, hydrogen pilots and demonstration projects in the US and Canada, Liberty's perspective, some thoughts about supporting policy, and I believe we'll be saving the Q&A for the end. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about our parent, Algonquin Power and Utilities. We are part of Liberty, is part of Algonquin Power and Utilities, along with Liberty Power. Liberty Utilities is 1,000 customers, or 1 million customers now across the US, Canada, Chile, and Bermuda. We just acquired a water and wastewater company recently, ESAL in Chile, and we've also just acquired the Bermuda Electric Company. And so we're very proud to say that we're 1 million customers strong in Liberty Utilities. In addition, Liberty Power is our unregulated company that does wind and solar renewable projects all over the world. For Liberty Gas Territories, oops, we got to go back. Back one more, please. Liberty has gas utilities in the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa. And we are based in New York, in Messina, New York, and cover the territories of St. Lawrence County, Lewis County, and Franklin County. Next slide, please. So St. Lawrence Gas is based in Messina. We're right on the Canadian border. We currently have 16,000 customers, of whom 90% are residential customers. And we acquired St. Lawrence Gas Company last November from Enbridge. Next slide, please. But really, the real driver of our conversation today is about our company's, Algonquin Power and Utilities, overarching commitment to sustainability. We are committed to our alignment with UN sustainability goals. Last year, we were ranked 10th in the world and the only Canadian-based company in the top 10 for corporate nights for our sustainability. And we focus on our environmental, social, and governance frameworks with how we approach our sustainability. So you can see why the conversation around hydrogen is so important to our decarbonization goals as an organization. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give some recent examples of pilots and projects in Europe. Next slide, please. And I wanted to provide an overview by country in Europe of hydrogen blending and injection allowed by country. And you can see where countries are in Europe. They have clean energy policies that are pushing them to really consider hydrogen. They are working hard on pilots and demonstration projects, transportation in Europe, so that they will be adopting this as a mainstream fuel. And, in the US, you can see California on the bottom there. We do have a ways to go. But, I hope that today's demonstration projects will give you an idea as to where things are moving. Next slide. So my first case study is High Deploy, and this is a study that is being done at Keele University in Staffordshire, England. Currently, they're using 15% hydrogen blend in a closed-loop system, with the potential to moving towards 20%. This is a first of its kind project in the UK. One of the interesting aspects is not only how the hydrogen blending works, but also how end users perceive the blending of hydrogen. They produce over 200 kilograms a day. They're currently moving from blue hydrogen, which is natural gas fired, with carbon capture and storage with the intent of moving towards green hydrogen. And I recently read up on this, and they are doing tremendous work with faculty and others who are on the campus and their customer perspectives about hydrogen and how they're feeling about the customer experience. So very interesting. Also, 83% of homes in the UK use natural gas. So if you blended 20% hydrogen into the gas network in the UK, they would have significant emissions reductions. Next slide, please. My next case study is in France, and this is Le Petit Village, Capelle-le-Grand in Dunkirk, France. This project is a trial hydrogen injection into the Le Petit Village neighborhood and an NGV refueling station for buses in the Dunkirk urban community. They have branded Hythane, a new gas composed of hydrogen and natural gas, and the ability to fuel buses with a hydrogen natural gas 6% blend, moving towards 20% over time. 50 buses are planning to be using this blend. And for the residences of Le Petit Village, there are 200 new homes that are using a blend currently below 20%. Green hydrogen is used with surplus power for hydrogen storage and demand. And they're looking at testing 3 technologies in hydrogen for this project: electrolysis, storage, and injection equipment. Wind power is currently being used to produce hydrogen through this process. So supported by the French government, very cutting edge, really interesting project. Next slide, please. And my last example from the UK is a project that is being done through DNVGL. It is a project called High Street. And this is a project that is looking at the new construction of this row house, very typical construction in the UK. They are testing adaptive combi boilers, which are BAXI, and also water heating through Worcester Bosch. And those pieces of equipment are adapted for 100% hydrogen. And this row house testing site is within a closed hydrogen network. Each of these houses has over 75 sensors to detect and measure hydrogen concentrations at various heights within rooms. They're testing what can happen within leaks, also testing the boilers and the water heaters. The equipment change out in the hydrogen future looks to be more cost effective than the electrification of the entire row house. So this is brand new, just is going on. And what I really find interesting is that many of the UK's natural gas companies are coming together to study and work on this project. So it's great collaboration in the UK for this and for other test sites. Next slide, please. So next I want to discuss the hydrogen examples in the US and Canada. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking today a little bit about California, about the company NextEra, and an example through Enbridge in Canada. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the transportation market in California. I know Sanjay touched upon transportation. I will say that Liberty Utilities is proud to be a member of the California Fuel Cell Partnership. We were just admitted as a member, and we are the only electric company in the state of California to belong to the partnership. And, you know, really California is driving the conversation around the hydrogen transportation marketplace. They are currently operating 40 hydrogen fueling stations in California through Shell and others. They are looking to add 20 additional hydrogen fueling stations in the state of California. And it's interesting that they're actually moving the hydrogen fueling pumps under the canopy along with standard gasoline to really get mainstream adoption of hydrogen fuel cells. There's been much discussion, particularly around heavy-duty trucks related to EV hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, particularly with Nikola and Hyundai. I know Hyundai has just released their heavy-duty trucks in Switzerland. So really tremendous opportunity in California for all of us to learn and understand how the market is unfolding there. Next slide, please. NextEra in Florida. They are the parent company of Florida Power and Light, and they announced in July of this year that they plan to retire their last coal-fired power plant, and they are going to invest in their first green hydrogen facility. This pilot project plans to invest over $65 million using a 20-megawatt electrolyzer to generate 100% green hydrogen from solar. If approved by their regulators in the state of Florida, the project will be online in 2023. So brand new, evolving, very dynamic project. Next slide, please. And I moved to Canada with an example of collaboration between Enbridge and Cummins. Cummins had recently purchased Hydrogenics, and they are doing a very unique project. This year in October, the Ontario Energy Board approved an application by Enbridge Gas for a project to leverage their Markham power-to-gas facility in order to pilot the blending of renewable hydrogen gas into the existing network. Through this pilot project, Enbridge Gas will initially provide a maximum hydrogen blend content up to 2% of the natural gas supply to 3,600 customers in Markham, Ontario, which is a suburb outside of Toronto. They are looking to do this in Q3 of next year. And by doing this one move, they are abating up to 117 tons of CO2. Their project is not planned to impact customer bills at all. The interesting thing about the Markham facility is this is a power-to-gas facility. It was commissioned in 2018 through a partnership with Enbridge and Cummings and the support of the province of Ontario. For the past 2 years, this facility has been used as a balancing facility for the electric grid. And really interesting, going to be starting up soon. More to see on this project. Next slide, please. So before I get to Liberty, New York, I want to talk about one project that came up today that I don't have in the deck that I wanted to tell you all about. It's one related to Hydro-Quebec. Today, they announced construction of an electrolyzer facility with a capacity of 90 megawatts of production of green hydrogen outside of Montreal. So if you care to Google that and learn more about that project, again, these things are happening daily, weekly for hydrogen projects. So I want to move to Liberty of New York. We are focused on providing our customers with safe, reliable, and affordable sources of energy. We look forward to progressing the state's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And as I mentioned earlier, we are very keen on our corporate sustainability goals as well as our customers' sustainability goals. And we really feel that hydrogen is part of this conversation. Next slide, please. So where we view the opportunity, we see New York State having tremendous opportunity using fiscal resources and using hydrogen to decarbonize our heating sources. Liberty and the North Country in particular are poised to play a leadership role in ample supply of hydroelectric. And we have a tremendous amount of power in the North Country with hydroelectric, wind and solar that are currently existing, proposed projects of renewables in the North Country. And hydrogen does offer a unique opportunity for energy storage when the sun isn't shining, the wind is not blowing, and the water is not flowing with hydroelectric. Next slide, please. So really, to end my conversation with you all today, the shaping of hydrogen policy is a really positive thing. We see that the opportunity for bipartisan support among many stakeholders. We see an incoming administration, particularly in the federal level, where hydrogen has been mentioned as part of the conversation at the federal energy policy discussions. And we see utilities like Liberty who welcome the opportunity to have these conversations about hydrogen and moving New York State forward. Next slide, please. So I think questions are going to be at the end, and one final slide. Next slide. Please stay safe. Thank you all so much.
Okay, I believe those are all of our presentations for today. So I'm going to read out some of the questions that we've received throughout the time in this call. And if you have additional questions or you don't hear what you needed to get an answer to, then certainly reach out to me and I can follow up with the panelists and get additional information. So our first question, someone who has to ask, is there any difference in performance between gray, blue, and green hydrogen? And it's to all of the panelists.
Okay, I'm going to take a stab. Bear in mind, I'm not an engineer, and I know that this is geared towards an audience of most engineers. I only focused on green hydrogen because I was viewing that as a solution. So I've not looked at gray or blue, but I know that green hydrogen, in general, the efficiency is 45 to 50%.
Okay. Anyone else care to comment?
Yeah, Shannon, the only, as Catherine said, right, the only thing I might add to that is I think when we're talking about performance of high purity gray, blue, or green hydrogen should not be that different. But if you're talking about, low purity gray hydrogen, used in some of the industrial application, performance of that hydrogen versus, high purity hydrogen being used in the mobility market will certainly be a bit different, right? But that's maybe something I would add.
Okay. Thank you, guys. The next question is, can hydrogen, I think, be harvested from existing industrial processes, i.e. gas, that is currently not used or is vented? Be considered green as it does not increase the CO2 output.
Would you like me to take that one, Catherine?
I would love you to take that one.
So Shannon, there is quite a bit of hydrogen being produced today, right? Which is based off of a chlorine plant, chloralkali facilities that actually have a hydrogen as a byproduct that actually comes not in the right pressure or the right purity level. So it does have to be purified. It needs to be compressed. Then you run that through a liquefaction process. So the plant that we actually have today in Charleston, Tennessee, it's a 6.4 tons per day plant that is in a process of being expanded to 10 tons per day. So it is in fact using that byproduct hydrogen that otherwise would have been vented. And so now the question that remains an interesting debate and discussion is it a blue hydrogen? Is it close enough to green hydrogen, similar to sort of like biomass or things along those lines, right? But we at least are thinking about it being more of a blue hydrogen. So yes, and today there is other players as well in the industry who actually do leverage the chlorine plant, those chloralkali facility, to produce their hydrogen as well, apart from just doing a steam methane reformer to produce gray hydrogen.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what is the current electricity to hydrogen conversion efficiency?
Sounds like that one's for me too. So Shannon, typically depends. So again, I think let's talk about the green hydrogen specifically, right? So electrolyzer is a little bit over 60% efficient, right? So the amount of the BTU content in hydrogen, how much electricity you have on that per kilogram of hydrogen versus how much electricity needs to go in. So it's about 52 to 55 kilowatt hour of electricity to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. When you're thinking about a gaseous hydrogen, it comes out at about 40 bar off of an electrolyzer, right? And then if you were thinking about liquefying that hydrogen, then you are talking about anywhere between 7 to 10 kilowatt hour of electricity to liquefy that 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And we're working on ways to improve the overall efficiency of the electrolyzer. But one of the things that I think is very important to note here, though, is it's not just about what is the overall efficiency of that electrolyzer, right? I think one very important point to consider here is, and most of the folks here on the call will know this, is the load following capabilities of the PEM-based electrolyzer, which is super critical when we're thinking about wind and solar, right? And I think Catherine and obviously Trish both talked about the intermittency of wind and solar, right? So I think if you have, sometimes it's not necessarily producing electricity, coinciding with the peak demand, but that's where electrolyzer can be ramped down to 10% capacity utilization and still would respond to that load within milliseconds, right? So that's where it could actually play a very tremendous role from really taking advantage of either that stranded or really low cost renewable. And again, if you're talking about 55 kilowatt hour to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen, let's envision a scenario where you have $15 a megawatt hour solar or wind. Then before you know it, the cost is starting to look very, very attractive compared to the gray hydrogen, even a reformer that is being built on site. Does that answer? I hope that answered the question, Shannon.
Oh, sorry. You did. Thank you. The next one, are there any projects currently in process in the U.S. that are based on H2 as a DG fuel asset?
So this one might be for Catherine or Trish, but I can start, Shannon, maybe, right? I mean, there is a case to be made here, essentially from the power arbitrage perspective, if you would, right? If one were to really think about this low cost renewables, and then, if you have some level of storage, then feed that through a fuel cell system to meet the peak power requirement, then you could envision that scenario. We do have a lot of activity going on, not so much, I would say, for the distributed generation fuel cell. We obviously do a lot of backup power, right? So I don't know if you want to put that in a DG solution or not. We are doing a lot of work on large scale data center backup as well. But there is instead of a gas-fired peaker, or thinking about how much hydrogen blend can you have in this natural gas-fired peaker, there is probably a scenario to think about where, low-cost renewable hydrogen, then use that hydrogen, to meet the peak power requirement instead of the single-cycle gas-fired peaker. That's a scenario where, the math could actually work out. But are we doing something like that? We ourselves are not. But there is some discussion. We've certainly heard from some of the larger players. Market. So I don't know, Catherine, if you want to add anything to that.
I would just say to John, that's the future we're envisaging. That's the future vision. I see it working. It has the technological ability, and it's the solution for the need to ramp up and down very quickly, on an independent power, system operator. So, I think it is a solution, but, we're not there yet.
Okay, this is great. And Sanjay, I believe some of these questions have come in at the beginning of the call, so they're probably directed towards you, and then it'll migrate over to Catherine and Trish. So the next question is, what is the cost of hydrogen?
Well, depends. It's a little bit of a depends question, right? Response.
Right.
And also one another thing, Shannon, I do want to be a little bit careful about getting too specific on the actual cost of our green hydrogen generation for reasons hopefully everybody can appreciate from a competitive standpoint as we're entering into a long-term contract, as we're thinking about return on our investments and things along those lines. What I can share here is today, we basically buy liquid gray hydrogen from industrial gas companies anywhere between $5.50 to $7.50 a kilogram, depending on the location. And I'm strictly talking about liquid hydrogen for the mobility market, not an on-site gaseous hydrogen using a reformer for a variety of different industrial application, right? Very big difference. So that's what we are paying for it. And we basically sit as a middle person, if you would, and we actually have a contract with likes of Walmart and Amazon where we supply that to them by buying from the industrial gas companies. It's really a pass-through for us. What I can share here is all the green hydrogen plant that we're looking to build. And once we start to produce that green hydrogen in-house, we should be able to sell it at the same price as a gray hydrogen while seeing 30% plus margin pickup, going forward. That's the best I can do from a pricing standpoint.
That's great. That's great. The next question is, what is the lifespan of an A2 fuel cell?
So depends on, so look, I mean, I think, we've been fortunate to have a lot of fuel cell system out in the field. And, so we think about at least 15,000 hours is the life of a fuel cell system. So it depends a bit on how often are you using, right? So it varies from the kind of the application as well. In case of a material handling industry, which is our core market, which is the majority of where we have obviously our 40,000 fuel cell system that have run actually 600 million hours so far. And even if you think about just 5 miles an hour for the material handling forklifts, you're talking about billions of operating data, right? That's where a forklift might put, it's running 24/7, right? So it might put more hours in 1 year than what a on-road vehicle would do it in its lifetime. But, so I think depends on the utilization, depends on how the system is being run, depends on the operating condition as well. But today we feel comfortable saying 15,000 hours. We obviously have a team internally that is focused on how do you continue to improve the life of that stack, which directly correlates with, if it's an on-road application, am I comfortable to give 100,000 plus mile warranty and things along those lines?
Great. So we have a few more questions for you, and I think we're going to start moving to the other panelists. Wanted to get what type of reporting or verification do you provide for an H2 generation source?
What do you mean by that, Shannon? I just want to make sure I give the right answer to the question. When you say H2, is it the verification for how it is a green hydrogen versus gray and blue, or when you say what does that mean? I just want to make sure I answer the question correctly.
I'm not exactly sure. And so Gary, if you want to send me a message post call, I can also get this back to you, Sanjay, and we can answer it in email. So we just make sure that you're basing.
Yeah, just want to make sure I'm giving the right response.
Of course. So do they have it? All right. So does Plug Power have to build new hydrogen products as they grow their fuel cell markets, or is there existing market supplies that they can utilize at least to get started?
So our demand today, right? And by the way, this is the evolving industry, and we've been very public about it, that our goal is to go from low carbon to zero carbon hydrogen solutions, right? Because we care about that a lot. It is the right thing to do. And that's number one, right? Number two, we are the largest buyer/user of liquid hydrogen here. We already consume about 35 tons of that per day. And that number is continuing to grow. We have publicly said that from our core market and our core customer, that demand for liquid hydrogen could be as much as 100 tons per day by 2024. So the short answer to that question is, when we're talking about building this 100 tons per day facility, yes, it is de-risked from that perspective in terms of where that base demand is, where the demand is going to come from. But having said that, look, we fully expect to continue to work with some of our preferred partners in the industrial gas space. There'll be a lot of swapping. We will buy some from them in maybe one location and maybe provide them some in the other location. And, so there'll be continued take or pay contract with some of them as well. And more importantly, we do believe that there'll be quite a big demand uptake coming from the on-road market as well, based on some of the points that I just talked about, right? There could be a 10x increase in that demand for liquid hydrogen as you look into 2025.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. We have an attendee that is thanking you for the talk. I want to understand if the uncertainties faced by wind and solar generation farms also affect the H2 production.
That's a fantastic question, because short answer is yes, it does, right? Having said that, we have certainly spent a lot of time thinking about a system design and a system architecture, right? So, which is why I think when I was referring to our effort here in the near term, we are really looking at it from the first plant is based on hydropower, right? So we don't have to worry about that intermittency. You do need to think about, weather, historical waterfall and all that, but you can get comfortable enough about 24/7 power, right? And that's number one. Number two, so what we are doing, and we have a live projects that we're working on right now, right? So in case of our project in Texas, we are overbuilding the wind farm, but there will be we also have a supply agreement with an ESCO that is going to give us that 24/7 load all the time, right? So we have modeled it in a way where 80% of the load can be probably met with oversized wind. Some of that oversized wind, when it's overproducing, will be fed back into the grid. We'll buy some from the grid. So net, we're still going to be 100% green electricity. And same case with solar as well, right? So this will be an overbuilt solar farm based on the capacity factor for the solar assets. But we will also buy some from the grid, but we will feed what we're not using at that particular point back into the grid. So the project in California is solar, project in Texas is wind. Project in Northeast and Mid-Atlantic will be hydro. Hope that answered your question, Shannon, or answer the question of the one of the.
Yes, you did. Thank you. So our next question, we want to know, in Europe, how does the cost of imported NG affect the economic and strategic importance of the homegrown hydrogen?
Look, in our opinion, and I'm going to turn it to Catherine after this, but maybe I can start. To us, right, the way we think about it, like this whole decarbonizing the electric grid with more and more renewables, right, and then using that renewables to produce the high value green hydrogen is clearly a matter of both national and energy security, in our opinion. So the short answer is yes. Now, second factor is, and I wonder if that is also an initiative and a thought process even among the various countries in Europe that are looking at electrolyzer and stranded renewables assets in that part, especially like Germany and many different places, right? So we look, it's all about the energy payment balance and things like that. But on the other hand, there is a lot of natural gas here in the US as well, right? So we shouldn't ignore that fact. But yes, if we want to really decarbonize the grid, then think about long duration storage beyond 12 hours, right? Then if we really want to think about long range, heavy asset utilization, transportation application, clearly green hydrogen will have to play a very substantial role in that broader energy mix.
Okay. I know you have, you might have somewhere to be, so we're going to start our questioning back for Trish.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. With all of the power in the North Country, does it make sense to transfer the energy to NYC by power lines or by hydrogen infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the amount of power that is in the North Country through hydro, wind, and solar presents itself to a tremendous opportunity to generate and create hydrogen, green hydrogen. And because you have a natural gas infrastructure in the state of New York, the ability to transport that hydrogen anywhere it's needed. The cost of capital to create the amount of transmission lines that are needed to move that power from the North Country into other areas of New York State is certainly costly. So I think it comes down to cost. I think it comes down to policy. And, I see a great future for hydrogen in order to be part of that conversation.
Great.
I actually
so the next
with Trish, it comes down, it's also why I'm high on green hydrogen, because I do worry about the stranded cost if we're not using the natural gas infrastructure that we have in place. And the cost of building new transmission is many, many billions of dollars. So whatever we can do to mitigate that and still achieve the clean energy goals that we set forth is terribly important.
Thank you. The next question is the energy required to produce a quantity of hydrogen greater than the energy produced by the hydrogen. I can read that again too. Is the energy required to produce a quantity of hydrogen greater than the energy produced by the hydrogen?
Yeah, I think that's a Sanjay question.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely get back with him. So a last question we have, as we convert to H2, are the safety protocols already in place, such as placing Mercapta to detect leaks? That might be a Sanjay question too.
No, I mean, Trish, do you know anything on that?
Yeah. I don't know anything specifically, I don't know of specific hydrogen policy or protocols from a gas infrastructure standpoint. I do know that SoCal Gas is currently working on injecting 1% hydrogen. They just announced that recently. So I'll be curious to see their protocols as to how they approach, how they inject and what we learn from them.
Yeah, I think this is something that needs to be tackled in a more robust way. And, it's not as it haven't been looked at, but, I think the utilities actually have to express their concerns, and you need to develop protocol as to how to allow the growth of hydrogen use in the United States. And this is something that we know really needs to be looked at fairly carefully. So Sean and I are actually hosting something in the end of January in which we're inviting a lot of utilities in New York State, a lot of energy policy folk to sort of thresh out these types of concerns so that we know how to move ahead. Sean, you want to talk about that? So we're going to
mute.
Yes, sorry, I took me a second there to swap my screens around. Yeah, so that'll be January 28th. We'll have more details at some point in the near future. But that's right, we're hoping to sort of hear from a number of folks in the industry to get, I think, a good idea of where the industry is in the New York context, where it's headed, and what needs to happen to ensure, I guess, the most efficient transition to that future.
So we're at the beginning, so a lot has to be threshed out, but we do feel strongly that there's a bright future.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to wrap our Q&A, but want to put some reminders out to everyone that we have a deadline for our May convention. The call for papers is on Friday. So if you're still interested, please let us know. And we have the call for papers for our convention in Boston, the Energy Conference in the East. So West is almost ready to wrap. East is getting ready to do the call to papers through the next month or so. Want to remind everyone that the 2021 webinar will start to be international calls that will be based off of European time zones, and some will be in their native language, some will be in English, and we will certainly let you know at the time of announcing these calls what you should expect. And our next call is going to be January 15th, and it's our first international call, and it's the solar photovoltaics, I'm going to mispronounce that, I'm sorry, and model development. So January 15th at 3 o'clock. And then Angel Morano is going to speak on her presentation on January 21st. So we're real excited about all that's coming up. We want to just remind you that if you sent in some questions and you didn't get the answers you needed, or we didn't get to the question that you had posed, then feel free to send that to me. And if you can please identify who you'd like to direct the question to, I'll make sure we follow up and get you all the answers that you need. Also, tomorrow you will receive a recording of this presentation, and it can also serve, that email will serve as your certification for attendance, so hold on to that. And again, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to give me a call or just email me at shannon@aeecenter.org. I want to thank our presenters today. I hope that you learned and gained a lot of information on our topic, and we appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to time in January. Have a wonderful holiday, and we will see you in January. Thank you.